At a time where the co-op heist genre is in dire need of new blood, you'd be hard-pressed to not have heard of the GTFO developers Den of Wolves. Broadcasting itself as from the creators of Payday the Heist and Payday 2, it's clear of their intent to make their name known, not just within the GTFO fanbase, but also win over the jaded, apathetic heisters of the former heist genre kingpin. Presenting itself with an intriguing, cyberpunk-themed trailer, it's clear the game has grand plans both conceptually and mechanically, without feeling the need to cater to imitation alone. That said, beyond some Q&As and a gameplay reveal, a lot of questions remain amongst the hype. And wouldn't you know it, I did get invited to 10 Chambers to play a very, very early version of the game, but a version nonetheless. We also got a chance to talk to the developers. We even got to have some interviews and discussions with Ulf Anderson and Simon Vikland. In all honesty, going into this event, Den of Wolves stuck out to me as a potential next best thing when it comes to heisting games. With that said, I've never been a huge fan of the cyberpunk aesthetic, as well as being skeptical if it could really deliver on scratching that Payday itch from the brief looks that we've had before. And to be honest, I carry an inherent skepticism since getting a little too excited after a previous early look at Payday 3 that resulted in a video, I think, contributed to the overhype and the painful disappointment that game produced, and still kind of continues to do that. With that said, Simon, Ulf and co are clearly passionate and confident in their vision for the game, are in no rush, as well as not being afraid to make mistakes here and there, which hopefully means they're dedicated to making the game they want to make and are less likely to completely fuck it up. Also, not to imply this isn't a game for GTFO fans, I'll just mainly be focusing on my perspective as a Payday player, mainly because I have much more hours in Payday, but... To paraphrase, the general setup for Den of Wolves starts with a complete collapse of the global economy. AI tools have trivialized breaking into vaults, banks, accounts, the loan. The world is essentially plunged into a dark age. But then the creation of a new tech, a neurological vault that can contain anything from trade secrets, vault codes, or the like. I am kind of paraphrasing quite a lot here, I'm sure it's far more interesting than making it out to be. This led to a surge in investment in what is now known as Midway City, the locale for the game, as well as paving the way for the dive mechanic. Think of it as entering the mine vault. The importance of these highly guarded secrets results in numerous lucrative opportunities for hired guns and mercenaries, going job to job for the highest bidder. They emphasize that in Den of Wolves you don't play the good guy. You can go from doing one job for one CEO, fucking over another guy, to the next mission working for the guy you just did over. It doesn't seem like there's much in the way of moral choices here, and essentially you just play as a hired goon.
Hired goons?
To put it generally, in Den of Wolves you play as a currently nameless crew that simply cater to the highest bidder, taking jobs of any scale or form, without moral compass in a city run by gangs, PMCs, the like. It's a much darker backdrop than anything we've seen with Payday, and the music, the narrative, and the aesthetics make this abundantly clear. With that introduction out of the way, it's time to discuss what we actually ended up playing. This was a very early build of the game, and I mean maybe even pre-alpha, pre-alpha we're thinking. A lot of stuff was missing or not working, we had crashes, frame rate issues, bugs. It would not be fair to bring these up as issues or shortcomings of the full game. Think of it more as a vertical slice or brief idea or framework of what the final game would resemble. In terms of what we had access to, we had one preparation mission and sort of a gallery museum sort of vibe, as well as a full heist, which included a narrative-focused introduction to the climax of the job before the guns blazing part. The latter is the one that we played the most, be it because of failing and restarting, or just being the media of the two. We also had access to, from the top of my head here, first things first, in this game you can actually die. Featuring a Payday the Heist or Payday 2-esque shield system, you won't last long in the direct line of fire, even one or two enemies without the plan to immediately shoot back. It's not quite as unforgiving as GTFO, but certainly not as piss easy as Payday 2 or 3. You don't want to be caught with your pants down, and in Den of Wolves, enemies rarely miss and get the line of fire on you from all kinds of angles. You need to be careful. I reckon folks that enjoy a bit of Payday the Heist will feel right at home with this level of difficulty. Enemies at this stage seem quite rudimentary, but they got the job done. Generally, each faction seems to have the regular goons, as well as one heavy type marked by their outfit being a different color or a chunkier build entirely. In the heist that we played, you'd start going against gangsters, later having a substantially more powerful faction intervene during the final act, providing a lot more unforgiving of a challenge. The tactics are what most Payday players will come to know at this point. Moving in groups, pushing up to you when you're in cover, breaching walls, etc. They don't hesitate to shoot back, which made the projectile shield, which you can essentially just put down, take cover behind, shoot right through, probably a little bit too good in this version. The HUD at this point was definitely unfinished, not much in the way of harsh criticism here, but you got to see your equipment charges, weapon loadout, health and shield in the bottom right corner of the HUD. The plan for the heist in the early version was broken into 3 parts. The first, break it into vaults to find 3 keycards. The vaults contain loot, ammo, health resources, using some kind of spider drill that breaks down and needs repair just like any old Payday drill. Once keycards have been acquired, you open the large dome present in the middle of the map to fight off the gang leader, who I believe is called Grimjaw. He talks shit at you the entire time you play, it's quite amusing.
Bad boys come raining down on this place a proper storm.
Once it goes down, you place 5 beacons in order to jack it into the dive by standing in circles around the map. Final act involves both completing the dives, of which there are 3 parts to it, while also fighting off the higher tier enemy types. And for the escape, you blow up at a window and zipline down. Personally, I felt the beacon stage of this heist was definitely the weakest. It just kind of went on a little bit too long. There wasn't really that many spawns happening during this objective either. But the combat being a genuine challenge did result in more cooperative actions, you know, less lone wolfing running around the map. We were usually huddled behind a projectile shield for dear life in most situations. The dive mechanic on this heist as well felt a little repetitive after repeat sessions, but it's worth mentioning this was a specific version of the game that allowed us to quick restart and repeat at our leisure. The full version of the game I think is going to require you to complete preparation missions before being able to immediately repeat the heist. It's unclear how much of this repetitive feeling will remain in later versions. With the dive concept having the potential it does, I must admit I'm not too crazy about the parkour segment compared to what could be done with it. I mean, for example, maybe just entering a gunfight would be more interesting than platforming. But the sound design and the general aesthetic of these areas was very cool. The gunplay, in my opinion, felt competent enough. Generally, I leaned towards using the pistol, which was good for rapid fire, had pretty low recoil and pretty good damage, and the DMR, which was a one-shot headshot machine with a pretty satisfying sound. However, I recall floatiness being a criticism from some of the creators of the event, which also applied to the movement to an extent. I'm no expert on gun feel in video games, so maybe my word isn't too weighty on this. I personally found the gunplay to be fine, but I wouldn't complain about any adjustments. As for the player movement, you have sprint, jump, crouch, slide, the usual stuff. I wouldn't say the sliding was as spammy as maybe it would be in Payday 3. The equipment in the game, as alluded to earlier, was a little mixed, with the projectile shield being the likely winner in preference for most. It was funny to set up sentries outside of the dome for Grimjaw to get completely annihilated by when it opened up, and the trip mines seemed to do exactly what you'd expect. I'm pretty sure the single use as opposed to the other gadgets, which you can pick them back up. Maybe an intentional design decision in order to make using your equipment more thought-inspiring, but good fucking god, it felt like finding a needle in a haystack when attempting to locate and recall equipment off the ground. Sentries especially. Some kind of HUD element or safe zone increase on the range needed to pick up equipment again would be most welcome, because sadly in almost all the sessions I played, I found myself focusing way too much on finding equipment off the ground, to the point I would start getting shot and dying, trying to find this tiny thing on the floor that I can't see. And the spawns as well, I'm not entirely sure of the logic on. It can range from groups pushing wave after wave and demolishing you, to sometimes it being oddly quiet with no spawns inside. I didn't find it necessarily boring or empty, but it would be nice to learn perhaps a little more about how the enemies decide their tactics and logic. Also, just as an unrelated side note, so don't forget to mention, the loot in this game are basically the bags you carry and toss that most would be familiar with from Payday. I'd say generally from the first impressions with the heist is that the groundwork is no doubt being laid down, and what is on display already is quite intriguing and engaging, with little forgiveness for getting sloppy. The constant shit talking from Grimjaw during this heist was very entertaining, and the set piece of a huge helicopter appearing through the window, preceding an entirely new faction appearing, was quite cinematic. On a mechanical level though, it doesn't provide much more than what we're known to do in Payday already. You know, you open vaults, stand in some circles, albeit the circles in Den of Wolves serve more of a means of moving the team from one point to another, rather than just being objective filler, like Payday 3, and get the bags to the escape. This isn't to downplay the moment-to-moment gameplay, which I enjoy the challenge of, but as a showcase heist, I don't feel like it was the most engaging or interesting offering, especially knowing the grander plan for the game conceptually. I feel like it wasn't bad, but I feel like we could have more interesting stuff to do than just open vaults, move bags, but hey, sometimes that's all you need. Overall, I enjoyed this heist, but I kind of feel like it's not going to be my favorite one in the full game. As for the preparation mission we did, I only got to play it once, and it was provided more as a tutorial to get us playtesters familiar with the controls, mechanics, etc. It seemed to have some extremely rudimentary incarnation of stealth, so that's definitely there in plan, but not exactly available to discuss in any meaningful form in this build. One cool detail that I did pick up on is to indicate that your character is in stealth, your entire view model is sort of an invisible cloak kind of look to it. I don't know. It's not a big deal, but I thought it looked kind of cool. The music and the sound design of the game, surprising no one, is a standout. As alluded to before, the sound design with the dives is wonderfully tone setting, sounding echoey, bassy, spacey. The sound design of the guns felt pretty punchy, and the music takes a more of a trap and hip-hop influence vibe, featuring slower but heavy-hitting tracks that really set the mood. Now, of course, it's Simon Viklund behind the wheel, so who's surprised there that it's good? Dick riding aside. In the heist we played, it seemed the music follows vaguely the system of Payday, of different intensity of music reflecting different parts of gameplay drama, but it also seemed to play 3 different tracks based on what section of the heist you're at. For example, the intro of the heist had different music, the boss fight, after the helicopter appears the music changes, and I believe the point of no return, or the escape segment, the music changed yet again. So that's about 4 tracks, I think. I believe Simon also spoke of plans for a more dynamic system. Take, for example, the track hitting a softer or higher intensity depending on where the player is, be it with their team in a firefight or on their own exploring the map. The music would reflect the context. I'd look towards the release tracks, Take Over and Inject if you want to vibe with what the music in this game will sound like. Also, when you complete a heist, it seems that the lyrics layers seamlessly on top of the currently playing track, which I thought was pretty cool. I thought that was a pretty neat little detail.
Focus on the civilians.
As for how heist and missions will work in the final game, well, it seems to be more of an ambitious and less simple system than we're used to in the Payday games. The idea of storylines that contain a selection of mission types and concepts that can lead to or contribute to the approach of a big heist. For example, a mission that gives you info on a certain weak point in a heist is given, one to gain information from an insider, etc, etc. An example of the outcome of these so-called preparation missions on the final heist would be the introduction segment to the heist that we played, for example. You could overhear news reports detailing stuff that we may have done, or you could hear random enemies discussing things we might have done. There's even somebody getting tortured who I believe sold information to us in a mission before.
Thought you could jack us? Take the boss's spot?
Stuff that just sort of shows the impact of your decisions. In summary, it seems 10 Chambers want to create a more player agency-focused outcome for what happens to the lead-up to a heist appearing, and what happens during it, rather than simply selecting the heist from a buy menu, for example. If I had to break it down, think of a storyline as a set of circumstances, plans, and executions that are specific to one run, or individual hosting a lobby, that involves different approaches and assets in place that are unique to their decisions, instead of a single set of missions or heists that are the same every time. This also leads into the option to have random players join in on your plans as a gun for hire. This is assumedly an option that you can decide when starting a new storyline. It seems you can decide who will be a heister in your lobby and who would be a gun for hire, and anyone who is marked as a heister can perform objectives, plans freely, whereas a gun for hire is locked out of interacting with any objectives and essentially just operates as somebody who is there to shoot enemies. The idea here is to prevent random players from interrupting an intended execution or plan. Also, stuff results in rewards for the person playing as this gun for hire. We didn't get to try anything related to this system, so it's really up to you to decide on if that sounds good or not. I mean, I guess I'm glad that it's an option and not just a forced thing to have, but I don't know, I don't usually mind having randoms in my lobby. I mean, sometimes it's a great way to meet new people. Other times it can be absolute torture, or people are griefing, so I guess as long as it's just an option, then it won't be too harmful, but I do understand if this sounds a bit confusing at this stage, and I wish I had more information to give you, but I kind of know as much as you do on this one. On the same topic, it seems the plan is for heist and mission rewards to range from gun parts, and potential customization options as well. The way Simon worded it in a recent Q&A implies this isn't necessarily random, but can be chosen depending on what the player wishes to redeem at that point. And as far as customization goes, I believe things such as masks, faces, voices, and outfits and weapons are all intended to be customizable at some point. As far as accessing these things go, the menu expectedly has a lot of stuff inaccessible or very unfinished. That said, the current setup is a crime-esque overview of a map of Midway City featuring blips, etc. that indicate available jobs, as well as pop-ups in the corner showing when a new storyline, lobby, or whatnot is being started. Once you're in a lobby, the menu features a sort of pre-planning safe room, with all the players in the lobby leant over the table looking down at some plans. I like how when a new player joins, they walk in from the side of the screen. There's also like a different animation based on if you're ready or not. In the background there's also a window showing a super rainy night. I know it seems weird that I'm mentioning this, I kind of wish I had footage of it, but I don't know, it's just nice to see a lobby that actually has some sort of source to it for once. Very nice vibe to it, just extra details that go a long way. I don't know, I'm just mentioning it because I liked it, I wish I had footage of it, but I would also expect a menu where you can customize your loadout and appearance. There was a grayed out hideout option on the menu. Not really sure what that means yet, but feel free to speculate. And it's a bit too early to say what the progression of this game will look like, whether it will involve a visible level to show your skills or familiarity with the game, or if it's just more about filling a golf bag, as Simon Vickland puts it, through rewards from completions of heists, missions, etc. The same goes for social features such as kicking and preferences, though with what we know so far about their plans for the host to have full control over their approach, it's safe to say such features will absolutely be present. That was probably set up just so if the host of a match crashes. It seems they have an early version of host migration functioning in Den of Wolves, which, if included in the full game, would certainly be positive. This also, to me, implies peer-to-peer will likely be used to some extent, and the menu sort of resembling CrimeNet a la Payday 2. Hopefully it serves as some kind of server browser. Maybe there'll be matchmaking, I'm not too sure on that. But it does seem more likely that you'll be able to see all available lobbies on this menu, which of course leads on to a hopeful inclusion of an offline mode or some kind of solo experience. Again, it's a super early point in development for the game, and it isn't worth jumping to conclusions about certain things, but it's probably worth outlining some potential elements that folks might want addressed or maybe looked into. One big one is modding support plan. Understandable at this point that not much may be said about it until the game reaches more of a finalized point, but it's an important benefit to have support for such a thing in games of this caliber, so it certainly would be nice to have. I didn't ask about bots for solo and co-op play. I know they were present in GTFO, so probably assume that they'll have them planned for Den of Wolves as well, but still not 100% on that. Also, far as a console release goes, this seems something way further down the line. I'm talking basically when the game is finished and out on PC. Depending on who you are, this may be a good thing or a deal breaker. As a PC player and with the pitfalls Payday 3 struggled with console parity, I'm fine with much of the development being focused on one platform, being PC. There's also the matter of stealth. I know that's meant to be in the full game for sure, and we had a pretty early look at it, but I think it's far too early to speculate on what it might look like. Also, I would assume some of the voice work in the game is unfinished or placeholder at this point. We're not really a fan of the nerdy sounding handler voice in this version of the game. Maybe it kind of clashed a bit with the sort of dark vibe the game's going forward. You got some guy who sounds about 18 years old shouting at you.
They must have been the ones who got the alarm earlier. Fuck!
Maybe that's a little bit harsh, no offense to the guy who voiced that guy, but enemies in this version of the game as well are quite basic, with only one special variant of a faction seemingly being present. Hopefully in the full experience we get to see more types of enemies thrown in so it doesn't become a little samey. Voiceover also feels relatively incomplete. Not a lot of talking from the characters was heard during the heist, but really I chalk it up to it being an early version while that's something that isn't being planned. As touched upon before, progression is a bit of a mystery at the moment, so it's worth saying I hope Den of Wolves receives something substantial to work towards progression-wise, be it through bragging rights, rewards, or shiny unique outfits and such. The idea of a traditional Payday infamy system seems pretty unlikely to happen due to the mechanics of the game. You know, there's no skill system, potentially no level locks for weapons, maybe they're just unlocked through heists or money alone. As a Payday 3 player, the risk of burning out or finishing all the content the game has to offer within a 2-hour mark is a concern, but hopefully with how things are being planned for Den of Wolves, replayability will be a strong draw. The dive mechanic, this is something that is quite often brought up as seeming a little bit weird or intrusive or, well, confusing to folks checking out the trailers and information about the game. I think my stance is that as a mechanic to shift an entire locale and concept on a whim without interrupting the game world, it stands to be an ambitious and unique idea that may result in memorable what the fuck moments that define the vibe of the game. That said, I do agree that the current platforming stuff is just not very interesting, especially that it's just 3 obstacle courses back to back that don't have much in the way of differences or even much of a challenge. And if one teammate doesn't make it, you just stand in a circle waiting for a timer to count down while they eventually get there. While I appreciate it aesthetically and ambition-wise, I wouldn't even be sure if I'd necessarily say to scrap the concept entirely. I think it needs more work in finding its legs and execution to not be as jarring or arguably silly. Also, this isn't a game that is going to imitate or copy mechanics from a game like Payday 2. It would certainly seem that mechanics like a skill system, perk deck equivalents, and the like are not present nor intended to be planned. One speculation I have is that maybe armor will be a choice. In the build we played, there were 3 notches indicating armor capacity, so it's not too far-fetched to imagine customizing that, maybe adding more armor at the cost of movement speed, stuff like that. Whether or not that's a deal breaker is up to your discretion, really. It's a different game doing different things. It doesn't really need to imitate such a thing for no good reason, but I can imagine the more blank slate approach to playing a heister is going to turn some Payday veterans away. And lastly, overpromising. The dive system's multiple potential incarnations, the emergent nature of planning and performing heists within the storylines, these sound great on paper, but it remains to be seen just how this will feel in action. With it being an early access title, it's likely implementing these to their fullest will take a while, with an inherent risk of disappointing or questionable results. Take it from a Payday 3 player. Under-delivering can absolutely ruin the excitement and chances for a game. Here's hoping for a smooth delivery of everything as advertised for 10 chambers, but inevitably putting a plan into motion can be hugely challenging. Also, feel free to mention any of your concerns in the comments. As a summary of what I've played, seen, and heard so far, I'd say Den of Wolves is a game firmly on my radar. The initial teasers didn't hugely pique my interest, however, the first few glimpses of gameplay had my curiosity. Now, having played an early version of the game, and also having discussions about the game with its developers, they now have my attention. While I don't think the game is close to being in a releasable form, this risk take shows more of a willingness to get a conversation going surrounding the game and its concepts. It's a game that will no doubt have intricacies and mechanics that click with some, and others not. It's not a Payday 4, nor does it need to be or have any desire to. It's providing something that I feel like has not been attempted for any game, certainly not a high-centric co-op FPS. It's an incredibly ambitious narrative and setup, and a lot of it will depend on just how accurately they can live up to the bold expectations being laid out when it comes to player agency and catering to the pre-planning heist fantasy. As long as 10 Chambers commits to the bit and sticks to their vision, I felt the result will be something both unique and enjoyable, a breath of fresh air for the genre. As always, the chance for failure or shortcomings are inevitable, so it's important to keep expectations at bay and simply observe what's to come. Here's hoping 10 Chambers can stick to landing and just make the game they want to make.
Divided the enemies line up one by one like a real foot soldier. Stand my ground when I stare them down, cause they can't control us.